Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and you are joining me today for another episode of Crime Rises Canada's podcast, where we discuss all things crime fiction from coast to coast, and occasionally, maybe not often enough, nonfiction too. Today is one of those occasions. Joining me today is author John L. Hill. Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. How's it going there?
Oh, I'm good too. Thank you. The reason we're talking is you are nominated for an Awards of Excellence in 2025 for your book, The Rest of the, and then in brackets, True Crime Story. And let's talk about that title later on, but it'll be one of my first questions for you. So you are nominated for the Brass Knuckles Award for Best Nonfiction Crime Book, sponsored by David Reed Simpson Law Firm in Hamilton. Uh, John, a little bit about you. John is a Canadian lawyer who has defended some of Canada's most notorious criminals. He holds a BA, MA, and JD from Queen's University and an LL.M in constitutional law from Osgoode Hall Law School. He has taught prison law at Queen's University and at the University of Windsor Law School. He has attended and presented papers at the International Association of Law and Mental Health Conference in Siena, Italy, Paris, France, and Amsterdam. He has lectured at the University of the Pacific Law School in California. Now retired, Hill is a columnist for the Law 360 Canada, an online newspaper serving Canada's legal community. He comments on current issues dealing with criminal and prison law. John has authored two books, Box Parole, The Terry Fitzsimmons and the Quest to the End of Solitary Confinement, published by Durvile Publishing in 2022, and the rest of the True Crime Story, published by AOS Publishing in 2024. He has contributed to a chapter of the Indigenous Justice, also published by Durvile Publishing in 2023, and a magazine article dealing with slavery in the 19th century Ontario for a Florida-based publication. John is a professional member of Crime Writers Canada and a volunteer as a mentor for lawyers wanting to practice prison law. John, whenever I talk to somebody who wrote nonfiction, I always want to ask two questions. What is the premise of your book, and are you the right person to be writing that book? I think your biography answered the second question, but if you want to say more, please do. But what are the premise of your book, and why were you the person to write it?
The premise of the book is that although I've practiced law for close to 50 years, uh, I don't think it's perfect. And I think that there's a lot of imperfections that go with the law that most people that just read the papers don't see. What I concerned about is that there's people who've been wrongly convicted, people who believe that the way to make our streets safer is just to lock them away and throw away the key. And unless you really know what happens to people once they are sent to prison, you can't really make a decision, informed decision, as to how we should be dealing with these people. Since I made it my life's work to talk about people who have been incarcerated or who have gotten in trouble with the law, I thought it would be a good idea to present their cases and let the public see what it's like, what they go through. And that's why I called it the rest of the story. Now I'll just go into that a bit. There used to be a radio series hosted in the United States, but from a fellow by the name of Paul Harvey. Paul would get on the radio and he'd talk about a certain story that a lot of us knew something about would happen, but he'd go and tell about what happened before the story arose or what came afterwards. And then he'd end up his bit on the radio by saying, "And now you know the rest of the story." So what I'm doing on this is I'm taking some stories that people might have read about or glanced by while they're reading the newspaper. And so what I'm saying is, here's what happened to this person before they got into trouble, and here's what happened after they got into trouble, and now you know the rest of the story. So the title of the book is The Rest of the True Crime Story. So it's giving a heads up that yes, we're not just talking about nice little things that happen at a supermarket. Uh, happen a lot elsewhere, and some pretty gory stuff. But the idea is that it's easy. What was it that said everybody has their 15 minutes of fame? Well, that happens for criminals as well. We see what they've done in those 15 minutes, but by the time the next news cycle rolls around, we're on to something else. And I wanted to write a book telling people what happened, why people got into trouble, and what's happened to them since. Most of the crime stories, and I'm not criticizing my brothers who write fiction, but a lot of these stories are just about who did it, what happened. We're focusing on the what when it comes to crime. And I'm more interested in the why it happened. So I'm trying to take these stories, they're real stories. For most of them, I was actually involved in the cases. And I'm trying to point out why they got into trouble as well as what happened to them.
You answered a few of my questions there in that one, John, but maybe we'll dig into this one a little bit more. One of the questions I like to ask nonfiction writers is their research. In your case, I think life was a little bit easier because you're directly involved in all of them. But even just because you're directly involved with them still means you have to do some research. So
Oh, for sure, yeah.
were you just able to look at your case files and be like, oh, this one sounds interesting. It'll make the cut, or
Well,
is there more?
I knew a lot of these stories originally for having dealt with them, but I found out that I go back, I take out my library membership and I've researched old newspapers and anything I could read on them, and in some instances talked to some professionals who have dealt with either these people or these issues, and tried to reflect that in my writing. The one thing I wanted to be sure, though, is that as you said, when we started, I've lectured at various places, at various conferences and at universities. And I'd get up there on the stage and I'd talk about how, yes, could be better. We need improvements in the law in this area. And everybody in the audience, who were also other professionals, would shake their head, yes, yes, I'm preaching to the choir. What I have to do is I got to take this message to the public. Have people that aren't associated with the law or with crime pick this up and say, yeah, I see that there's room for improvement here. And so what I tried to do is to write it in a non-legalese fashion so that people could understand what I'm trying to say. So I do have to sometimes get involved in explaining there is a legal process, but I try to do it in a manner that people can understand what's going on.
Well, I could attest that having read two of the stories so far, yes, I understood them. And like you said, there is legalese there because it's part of the case, but you explain it very nicely and very approachable. So well done. Um, I think one thing we haven't mentioned too much is a lot of this is revealing what happens in prison. So now that somebody's been convicted, what's going to happen to them? And you talk about like the hierarchy of who's safe in prison and who's not. Um, I like the forward that Justin Ling wrote, an investigative journalist. He says the public knows far too little about what goes on in our prisons. That is both by choice and design. Um, and another place, I think I can't remember if it was you or him who said it's like nobody wants to know what's in the sausage. So you're telling us what's in the sausage in 16 stories. What is it that a lot of people misconceive about our prison system?
Well, part of the problem is that there's walls or giant fences around all our penitentiaries, and everybody thinks that's to keep the inmates in. I think it's as much to keep the people out. They don't want reporters. They don't want people snooping around at what goes on there. And a lot of it is bad things that have happened that they just don't want people to know about. And so part of my practice when I was doing prison law was actually suing the correctional service for disrespecting the rights and the opportunities of people who were imprisoned. And then of course Newspapers get a hold of it. You've sued the Correctional Service of Canada. So we, the taxpayers of Canada, have to pay out thousands of dollars uh, for somebody who has raped and pillaged in our community. It just seems wrong. But so what I'm trying to do is to say, no, people are people, whether they're in prison or on the streets. And our laws apply to the people on the streets as well as the people on the inside. So let's treat everybody fairly. Let's make sure that if the laws are not respected, then there is some sort of a remedy for that. If you For example, we read stories about. I just did a column that has just been recently published by Law 360 Canada, where I compared the food services of Beijing number 2 prison in China, where people eat horrible meals, and the food provisions in the Ontario correctional institutions in this province, and a lot more similarities than there is differences. So if what I want to show people is, yeah, what goes on inside, and is this fair? Would you like your son or daughter treated like this? And most people once they realize that there are injustices that happen inside and that people are treated terribly, and very often by other inmates, then they start to look upon the need for reform and rehabilitation a whole lot differently.
At the same time, I mean, you're telling stories of criminals, in some cases, not all cases.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much, but you start of the 16 stories in there, you start with the story of Selva Sobaya, Canada's most notorious rapist.
Yeah.
It's hard to have pity for him, and at the same time, you're not trying to create pity for him. If you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about it? And like, it's a gray story. I don't know how else to say it.
This is a fellow who came to Canada, and he was able to lure a young woman into basically Harvey Weinstein situation. He pretended that he was a movie producer. He would get young, vulnerable women to come back to his apartment, ply them with alcohol and drugs, and then have his way with them. It turned out that he was caught, and by the time that he was up being sentenced for the first few of these that he was caught for, uh, multiple more women came forward, and as a result, he ended up being named Canada's most prolific rapist and sent to Kingston Penitentiary. But even there again, we have to continue his story. What happened to him inside? And thereupon, because his story became known, he was set upon by other inmates, beaten, could have been killed, and yet Correctional Service Canada did nothing to protect him. And so on the one hand, the Correctional Service of Canada can be blamed for not looking out for his welfare. But on the other hand, one of the sad parts of the story is even while he was inside, he was making phone calls to women and getting them to send them photographs and doing his same old routine that he did on the outside. And again, it was all because of the fault of the Correctional Service. We expect, as taxpayers, we expect the Correctional Service of Canada to do a lot more to make sure that people aren't replicating their crimes from the inside. In the end, Selva was deported, and nobody had any tears for him when he left.
No, and you often say this too, like the point of good or no, it's wrong, I guess. It's misconstrued. Like there's no reform in these prisons. Like there's no way this guy's getting reformed. Um, you're saying that you can go in there as an innocent person and come out a hardened criminal. Um, but at the same time, like the true purpose is really without I don't know, giving away is not the right word, but it's giving society a feeling that they're safe from these criminals because they're not in our backyard anymore. Does
A
it serve
lot
anything more?
A lot of it is just making sure that they stay away and stay out of the newspapers. They don't want people making waves inside, and as a result, they could be doing so much more. One of the good things that we had in Canada over the past number of years was we had appointed a commissioner of corrections that brought in sort of the Scandinavian model where more reliance on making sure giving people hope and a goal, transfer from a maximum security prison down to a medium security to a minimum security, get involved in occupations, learn some sort of a skill, upgrade your education, uh, so that going to prison can actually be like doing a stint in the army. It's for your benefit, although bad things happen in prisons. But we differ a lot from prisons in the United States, where again, it's just all punishment and no rehabilitation. We do put an emphasis on rehabilitation in Canada, and for that, the government should be applauded.
I did want to end on a happier note, so thank you. You're helping. I'm going to go back to the beginning of your book, your dedication, because there are a few organizations on top of the changes that the government are making that are very big into prison reform, and you're a part of some of these. Would you like to talk about these groups and what they're doing?
Well, one of the things, and I was very fortunate to be involved with when I lived in Toronto, I was on the board of directors of what was then called the Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted. It's now called Innocence Canada. And it's a group of lawyers that look into cases of wrongful convictions and actually bring them to court and making sure that the wrong that was done to these people, how our system failed them, is done away with, and they can actually be exonerated. And of course, one of the stories in my book deals with Tammy Markart, which you've mentioned before. Tammy was a young woman, not in the best marriage, but she had a couple of kids. She was home. She tried to upgrade herself as much as she could, being a young mother of two at that point in time. And her baby had sort of a sudden death syndrome, and she tried to give it resuscitation, and in uh, this was looked upon by Dr. Smith as striking her baby because there were wound marks around the checks where she was trying to revive the child, and she was eventually found guilty of murder. And then I go into the story about how a young mother does time in a prison. She was pregnant at the time that she went in, having to give birth, give up her child while in prison. And then it was only by the luck of the Association of Defense of the Wrongly Convicted, or Innocence Canada, that she was able to get back on and have and found out that her trial had really messed her up and that had accepted wrong evidence, and she was eventually exonerated. And it's one of those cases where Innocence Canada can brag about what a great job they've done in getting this woman free from her wrongful conviction.
Yeah, as you say at the end of the story, there was no winners, unfortunately, but at least Tammy's not in jail anymore.
Yeah.
If that's any consolation to anyone. So I find the book fascinating. Um, it's, like I said, approachable. I think anyone could read it. Sometimes with nonfiction, you have to read everything twice or three times. It's not the case. You may want to, but you don't have to. It's very well done. Congratulations, John.
Well, I have to give credit to my people that I've met through the Crime Writers of Canada who are fiction writers. They've got the hard job. They have to make up a story. Mine is all handed to me at the outset. All I have to do is retell it. But I tried to retell it with a purpose, and that's
Mhm.
the point of writing the book.
Well, as I tell everyone, I do not know who won these categories. There's three members of Crime Editor Canada in this category with you. I'm going to wish you all the best of luck because I'm rooting for all three of you, and well done.
Thank you very much.